This is also to do with property, but it's real estate property, etc. But it's a very different angle on the industry. This was an interview that Walker Bragman did on Breaking Points about how the state of New York is handling remote work and how corruption led to the interim governor essentially flipping her position on this issue. So we're going to show you guys the first portion of this interview. This again is Walker Bragman from the Daily Poster on Breaking Points.
Now for our weekly partnership with the Daily Poster, we have a reporter for that outlet, Walker Bragman, who is out with a great news story. Great to have you, Walker.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, our pleasure. Let's go ahead and throw the tear sheet up on the screen here. Quote is, "It's time to get back to the office. Facing a primary challenger and courting real estate interests, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is pushing to end remote work." Just break down for us what you found here.
So interim Governor Hochul has been pushing for really since the start of the month or last month to end remote work in New York. Now she's not laid out any concrete actions that she's going to take, but she is encouraging employers to bring people back. Now, what's interesting is that push was happening simultaneously with a surge in COVID cases. And I mean, that to me stood out. Like, that doesn't make sense. Why are we not encouraging remote work at a time when, there's still a very real risk? Now, admittedly, a lot of people in New York City are vaccinated, but that does not necessarily mean that the virus can't spread or that there aren't people who are vulnerable. And I tend to be of the mind that public policy should factor in the most vulnerable. And this pandemic will not be over until it's over for, those people.
And Walker, one of the things you're pointing to here is that the real estate industry in particular is pressuring Kathy Hochul very hard. What did you find in terms of the financial connections here behind what she's pushing?
So Hochul has long been supported by commercial real estate interests. But what's interesting here is that she's facing a primary challenge from New York's Attorney General, Letitia James. And James got a lot of real estate money too during her run. So the industry, I guess, is sort of up for grabs, or maybe up for grabs. And so this position does track with an industry goal of getting everybody back into offices, because the pandemic has seen a massive decline in the amount of office space that companies need. So that hurts property values, and it is in their interest to get people back to normal, or the pre-pandemic normal.
Yeah, that was the part that was really revealing to me, because I actually hadn't thought through the fact that anyone who has real estate interests, commercial real estate interests, are very much interested in getting people back in the office, because otherwise there just isn't as much demand for your properties and you're not going to be able to command as high prices. So you've seen a lot of sort of CNBC types making this push too, making the case that, people really need to be back and productivity is better. But we didn't actually find during the pandemic, when white collar workers were working from home, that they were any less productive. So what is the real case? Even once we are beyond the pandemic, if we ever, get to that point, I think people have enjoyed, in some respects, having the flexibility to work from home or move out of New York into other cities and have more flexibility within their lives.
Look, I think it was a game changer, honestly, in how work is going to be done. And I think we're sort of pushing against the tide, and it's somewhat futile. That said, look, I do think that this all sort of stems from the same place, that there is this mentality in this country that business interests are more important than human lives. And we have seen that on display throughout the pandemic, not just from employers who want their employees back, who are calling their employees back, or from commercial real estate interests who are funding or lobbying politicians or to push these back to work policies, but from the federal government too. I mean, our refusal to adopt an elimination strategy has led to hundreds of thousands of American deaths, and these continued ongoing waves of COVID that we keep seeming to have. And so I mean, it's a really big problem. I think it's a problem with our culture.
So that was a fantastic piece. He went on to discuss that further if you guys want to go find it. But he's really hitting at an issue that I think is going to become a big one. And part of the reason I think it's going to become such a big issue is you're actually going to have big money fighting against big money on this issue. There are a lot of big businesses that like not having to pay the rent and will be happy to leave some of their employees home to work remotely. And then there are also these it's often the same firms we were just talking about, the Carlyle Group, Blackstone, BlackRock, etc. They're going to very much want everyone back to work because as Walker mentioned there, it creates more demand for property, which means they can charge higher prices, right? If you don't have as many people working in offices, then the companies who own the office spaces don't get to make as much in rent fees. So this is going to be a very interesting issue to follow going forward because the powerful are going to be fighting against the powerful on this one. It kind of reminds me too of I remember this was a lot earlier in the pandemic, but I saw someone wrote an editorial piece that basically said like we need to get back to work because workers are way less productive at home, right? And it turned out the guy that wrote this piece owns a company that makes office equipment. So I wonder why he might want people back in the office, right? It's so you see this a lot where it's a very obvious and transparent motivation to take the position that's being taken. It's a strict like business opportunity that is being exploited by these big businesses and executives and shareholders. But this, this will be fascinating to follow because I think there are a number of things that that this pandemic may sort of have long-term implications on. And I think one of them is the extent to which we work remotely. I mean, you guys, like a lot of jobs could be done at least partly remotely. And I think a lot of companies are going to look at that and say, boy, I could save some rent money, right? Again, rapacious incentive from the companies as well. But when you pair that rapacious incentive structure up against the Carlyle Group's rapacious incentive structure, you get this very, I suppose, in a sense, satisfying clash because one of them has to lose, right? But this will be an interesting thing to follow. I also think this could have effects on, we're nowhere near adequate housing reform, but if a lot of this space is no longer needed for work, if a lot of people end up working from home, that would free up a lot of space for other things like housing or like public services for the community. So I would be interested to explore how some of those spaces could be used beneficially, could be used in a positive way to uplift and benefit society or house the unhoused. So this all, like, there's a lot at play with this dynamic, and I appreciate Walker and the Daily Poster and Breaking Point's touching on it. And it'll just be very interesting to see how the pandemic ends up affecting commercial real estate going forward. And obviously, you guys, it seems pretty clear to me granted, I haven't exactly dove all the way into this issue, but in the little bit of research that I've done on this, it seems pretty obvious that there was not any, effect in terms of productivity. Workers were not like significantly less productive at home. Obviously, I think to some degree that's like a person to person thing. Some people get more distracted at home than others. But on the whole, it seems like the data pretty much backs up like workers were just as productive and effective from home. So I think a lot of people prefer that. I mean, think about the commute that a lot of people are saving. You guys, even like my dad works in the city of Seattle. We live 20 minutes east of Seattle. But if you're trying to make that drive during rush hour, it could be a 45-minute drive or an hour drive each way. Imagine saving that every single day for decades. Like there's a lot here that could be beneficial. By the way, also, how much fuel would be saved? How much less fuel would we burn if people were not commuting every single day? There are so many ripple effects from the working at home thing that I think are all kind of fascinating. And, you know, there's also like just to be totally fair about it, there are, I think, potential downsides. I think for some people, getting out of the house every day is good for their mental health. I can speak for myself. When I end up stuck in my apartment for 2 or 3 days at a time, it's then all of a sudden it feels like an outing just to run to the grocery store, or you know what I mean? So I don't know. I'm fascinated by this from a number of angles to see how all of this kind of plays out. And, you know, I think it's an issue that is going to get a lot of attention from sort of the corporate world and the finance world, as well as everyday people going forward. I would overall like to see us work from home more, you guys. It would clear the roads up. It would clear up a traffic problem. It would cut down on emissions. It would allow people to have more free time in their lives. So, you know, it'll just be interesting to see how this plays out. Which of the elites gets to win this battle, right? Does big finance win and get everybody back in the office so they can make their totally unnecessary rent fees, or do the other businesses win out and stop paying rent and then undoubtedly pocket the change instead of passing it on to their workers, right? We'll have to wait and see. But great reporting there from the Daily Poster and Walker Bragman. If you guys don't follow their work, I encourage you to follow them as well. David Sirota, Walker Bragman, Julia Rock, I think, Andrew Perez and others. Fantastic work over there at the Daily Poster. They're always revealing corruption and telling the stories behind the scenes. Excellent work. And speaking of the Daily Poster work,